Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the College Info Geek podcast, the internet's best resource for getting your hands on... What am I... I don't even know.
Something.
I don't even know where my brain went there. We're the internet's best resource for flubbing your intro, I guess, but we're the internet's worst resource for having a 281st intro joke that actually lands. We don't have that.
That's fair. We did not do that. You have to go to another podcast with 281 episodes.
How many calendar days
jokes.
do you think that Jerry Seinfeld crossed off? Because you know the whole story about how he got good at jokes and comedy by just, marking off every single day that he wrote a joke, and he had the whole don't break the chain method. Do you think it was more than 281? Did I just fail the Seinfeld method?
Honestly, I've heard some people say that on a quiet, dark night, you can still hear Jerry Seinfeld crossing off his calendar.
In your house. What am I hearing? Can I point the mic at the table to get this this Foley?
Jerry?
Is that you, Jerry?
I told you to stay out of my house.
It's okay, Martin.
It's just a joke.
Can't you take a joke?
Horror movie starring Jerry Seinfeld.
Okay, I will count that. I will count that as an intro joke.
It's going to be a great movie.
Where was I going for get your hands on? Oh, I said it in
know.
sponsor reads all the time. Like, get your hands on audiobooks.
Oh, okay.
Oh, hey, this episode is sponsored by Audible.
Cool.
What a coinky-dink. But we don't do ads until the middle, so you're going to have to wait for me to segue into an ad so smoothly that it's like butter. Sponsored by Miss Buttersworth. Wait, that's a that's the syrup.
That's syrup. Tom doesn't know what he's talking about today.
I shaved and I lost my superpowers.
Yeah.
Which apparently were the ability to speak coherently and come up with an idea
We don't
for
need
a
that
podcast.
for a podcast. We don't need to speak coherently.
That's true. We certainly don't need to
ridiculous.
be able to speak with any kind of eloquence, diction, or have anything of substance to say.
Yeah.
This is a podcast. It's the internet. It's yet another drop into the endless sea of content.
Yep.
Will this be the drop that changes your life? Maybe.
Maybe.
Because today we're talking about something that we have been doing for quite a long time.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for more than a decade. Actually, no. I've been doing it for precisely a decade.
Is that specific to College Info Geek, or are you referencing the age?
Working
the previous
with
things too?
working with friends.
Okay, yeah. I've been doing that for
entrepreneurial
so long.
projects, on art projects, on anything. We're going to talk about what you should know if you want to start a project or a business with a friend, or, this is also a pretty common thing, hire a friend.
Yeah.
Because, I kind of did that
Yep.
a couple times.
Yep.
Oops.
It's a thing that can happen. Mm-hmm. And, also this a family, significant others, anybody really. Mm-hmm. But I assume they're also your friends. So
I don't know, man.
still counts.
I don't know.
But it's dangerous.
Is my girlfriend my friend?
I don't know.
Seems like they should have.
I want a girl
label that
enemy.
There we go. Yeah,
I need a girl enemy. I'm gonna look for one.
you probably have one.
I need to figure out
You're on the
who
internet.
it is, then, so that I can mark them as such on
Show
Facebook.
yourself.
I'm sure Facebook has a slot for it.
Can I put that in my Twitter bio? Enemy to this person.
Yeah, arch enemy. Tag them. But
Am
a lot
I
of
your
people say
enemy
not to
just
do
because
this.
I'm not a minimalist? Like the anti-minimalist.
Maybe.
Except you said you like the set.
Yeah,
So
the set's
apparently
still
I'm
cool.
not.
It's like a taste. You're like a tasteful non-minimalist. It's
Yeah.
not. This isn't like a hoarder set, which would upset me greatly.
I do like some amount of order to everything. It's
Yeah.
just in terms of things, I like to have a lot of them because I like to do a lot of things. So I'm not a great minimalist in that regard. Anyway, I want to talk about this because my first experience working with a friend went horribly. Oh, and this reminds me, they also tell you in like those college advice books for, going to college that you should not room with your friends.
Yeah, also a risk.
That was also correct. At least in my case. But then, so I don't know how to think about this because I went to college with a friend and was roommates with him, and that did not work out. We had differing philosophies on cleanliness. I'll put it that way. But then, I ended up rooming with friends after that, and that worked pretty okay.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I guess it's like when you're friends with somebody, usually you're friends in a context where you only see each other for a limited amount of time, and then you go to your respective homes. So you've built a friendship on that, and then when you decide to live together, there's like a whole lot of tests and tribulations for your friendship.
Yeah, it's like being friends does not mean you're automatically compatible to live together, but sometimes it works.
Yeah.
But it's
so I
a
guess
risk, though.
The advice to not live with your friends doesn't mean that you will not be able to live with your friends guaranteed, but it does mean that it's likely that your friendship could be damaged.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. And that is exactly what can happen when you decide to work with friends.
And that could be even more damaging because mixing business or money of any kind with friends, family, or loved ones can get
or like
real
it's the same
iffy.
thing with lending family money or friends money. Like I think my dad told me this. He's like, if you're gonna lend a friend money, you need to assume that money's gone.
Yeah.
Because not everyone operates by the same set of principles. And I don't know about everyone, but I grew up with the principle instilled in me that if you're going to borrow money from somebody, it should be your number one priority to pay it back. But not everyone operates that way, and that can cause a lot of emotional tension.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Let's talk about working with friends, though, because we've done it several times.
Yep.
In different contexts.
Several times in different contexts. This is very true.
And I think we've kind of figured out. I don't know if we figured out how to do it. Like I don't know if I'd be comfortable putting out a book with like my smiling face on the cover, like Dr. Oz with a chin pose.
Yeah.
It's like how to work with friends, guaranteed 10 steps, published by HarperCollins.
But we should certainly be aware of many of the specific risks involved and probably have answers as to how we are not succumbing to those risks at this very moment.
Yes. We've learned a thing or two. So let's start with our initial failures, because I know you had one.
Yeah.
And I know I had one too.
I've had some times that didn't go very well.
Do you want to go first?
Well, and this isn't nearly as bad as it could have gone. Like, it was a pretty positive experience overall. But I will say there was a time where I was working with a friend in a couple contexts, actually. And great friend and everything. But we had a regular job together. We tried to start this organization thing together. Both were cool. Both had the reasonable amount of success I wanted. But where we had different philosophies for the business spending.
Mm-hmm.
And also, a lot of our specific interests and talents lined up too much. So we both kind of wanted to do the same things. So I think the biggest thing there is that control did not get to be divided in a very favorable way.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of disconnected from some of the parts that I otherwise would have worked on because I was just like, well, you want to work on them, so you do that. But it wasn't as smooth as like this is because we've largely, I do a bunch of stuff you don't even touch for the most part. It just doesn't happen.
Nor do I want to.
But we were young. We did not really know how to do this. And there were some times where we were fairly annoyed with each other, either for something that we were like relying on the other to do, and then it didn't happen, or we would bring like some stupid little petty argument from just the friendship world, or from our regular job. Just like,
oh right, because
you didn't
worked
do
together
that
at the same job.
If one of us didn't do something for the regular job, the other would have to probably pick up that slack. And just, why didn't you do that?
Yeah.
But if we brought in a little petty argument or something to the business, it was no good. Mm-hmm. And that stuff, the problem was we hung out together, we worked together, we had side projects, so there was no escaping it. We didn't have...
You were basically like a married couple.
Basically, and what is the stereotype of a married couple on TV? It's that they argue about a bunch of things, but we could never get out of it. We could never escape.
Because if you go to your part-time job, there he is.
Yeah, so
go to school, there he is. Friend group, there he is.
Yeah, and it's not like we were going to stop hanging out. But it's like just little stupid things like that, especially when you're young and bad at emotional management. But if you don't know how to keep the lines intact, you risk kind of ruining everything all at once. And we didn't ruin everything all at once. And eventually we just decided, we're done. I went off to other college.
Yeah.
Stopped being a big part of the side project, and we sort of dissolved it eventually. We're still good friends. Everything's fine. But I can't say that it was always super easy.
So I know you guys are good friends now. What did it do in the moment? Like, was there ever a time when you guys weren't friends, or it was like really rocky because of it?
I don't know if I would say we were ever not completely friends, but along with a couple of other people, actually, there were times, I feel like just high school and early college were just, I don't know how to be an emotional human. So there were a few times where it was like we wouldn't hang out for a while, or we were just like kind of subtly bitter at the other person. Just like, I remember what you did, or I don't like this, and it got all confusing. But I also personally don't know if I would ever say we weren't friends, because I don't think I could say that about anyone. I'm kind of infinitely forgiving, which can be a problem actually in these situations if I forgive too much in a business sense.
Yeah.
It could mess things up. But I don't think I will ever call any of my previous friends not my friend in some way. Or at least acquaintance. I've never made a straight up we can't talk anymore kind of person happen.
That's fair. Mine was actually, I think I was 17 when this happened. I had a friend in math class, and we learned that we both knew HTML. So, like they say in that Weird Al song, we made a business doing websites. We were just like, hey, you know HTML, I know HTML. What if we started building websites? And I think we went our entire senior year just sitting on this idea. I took a web dev class, and I used the final project for that class as an excuse to build the first version of my website, or I guess our website for our company, which was terrible, by the way. You've seen it.
Yep.
It's real bad. Let me tell you, when a 17-year-old high school kid gets his hands on Macromedia Fireworks, which is basically like Photoshop for the people today who don't know what Fireworks was, and learns that there is a glow function for every layer and you can make it whatever color you want, chaos is going to ensue.
Everything is glowing.
I was so proud because every layer had a drop shadow or a glow of some kind. And I'm like, this is such a complicated design. How cool is that?
How could it not be good?
Yeah. It's like jam bands, you know? A lot of that music is more fun to play than it is to listen to.
Yeah,
it's like musicians are having a great time.
This has got a little bit of literally everything. How could it not be the best?
What am I listening to right now? This is like freeform fusion jazz metalcore with some like bossa nova hip hop on the side.
Is that a pig on the stage?
It is.
It's screaming.
And yeah, it is. It's pig squeal music.
It's got a mic.
Job for a Cowboy.
It's got its own mic.
I never realized that the singer for Job for a Cowboy was an actual pig.
Yeah. It's the only way.
So we get done with high school and we're like, dude, let's do this. Let's like actually make a business out of it. And we actually did. We went to the county clerk and we got like a fictitious name for the business setup. And this was my first mistake. We made it a partnership. Like in terms of the official business, like we drew it up as a partnership and we made it 50-50. This is not a good idea.
Yeah.
I think.
I would say that is part of the problem from my initial experience, too. Mm-hmm. It's like there's no clear hierarchy if opinions differ.
There's nowhere where the buck stops. If you have 50% and someone else has 50% and you are butting heads and you need to make a decision to go forward, then you're going to have to hope somebody gives ground.
Yeah, like
otherwise the entire thing is going to just fall apart, which it did. But initially it worked well. I felt that the best way to get clients would be to just go to the community college, ask for like if they had a job board of sorts and they had a binder full of job postings. So I just flipped through and I found a couple of people looking for websites, called one of them up and I was like, hey, we haven't built a website for a client before, but we'll give you a big discount for being our first client. And weirdly, they took us on.
Nice. Risk takers.
So yeah, I think we drew up a contract, and I at least did this correctly. We drew up a contract because in high school I convinced my business teacher to buy an entrepreneurship textbook, special order, so I could read it, and she did, which is great. Thank you, Mrs. Henshaw. And
Nice.
it was the biggest thing in there was like, yeah, you need to have a contract if you're going to work with clients. You know, that way they can't say, oh, we didn't agree on what to pay, or, you know, there's any number of things that can go wrong. So biggest tip, if you're going to go into business or be a freelancer, have a contract. You don't necessarily need a lawyer to draft one for you. You can, but when I was young and scrappy, the thought of paying a lawyer $300 to draft me a boilerplate contract was like out of the question. I didn't have $300, so I just found one online and wrote up something very similar in Microsoft Word and hoped it was good. There probably were missing sections, but luckily nothing went wrong. So we had that. I think we charged them $300. And for that $300, we ended up having to like drive to their office 5 or 6 times for long meetings where we'd sit in the boardroom and the CEO of the company would go like line by line over the website and be like, do you think the word excellent should be changed to exemplary? It was like super, super duper detailed.
Wow.
But hey, we had a client and we ended up getting a few more clients. Like one of my teachers had a condo in California that he was renting out every year and he wanted us to build a website for it. And that worked pretty well, but I started to learn that my drive to work was a little bit higher than the other person's, and that led to some headbutting where I'm like, hey, we have to get this project done, so we should probably work on it. And it ended up being me working on it for the most part, but then splitting the money 50-50,
Yeah.
which I wasn't a big fan
That's
of.
not going to end well.
So eventually I just dissolved the partnership and split the assets 50-50, and we ended up still being friends for a while, but we didn't work together after that. So the lesson I learned from that is just because somebody else has a similar skill set or something that's complementary to you doesn't mean that they have the same work ethic, the same plans for how they want to do things. It doesn't mean you're compatible. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't work together, but it does mean that you need to set expectations up front. You need to communicate really well, and you need to have somebody who is kind of the ultimate arbiter and decision maker.
Yeah. And at least for like each section, you know, because even if it's just each specific responsibility, if it's 50-50, who's specifically responsible for that?
Yeah.
Is it this one? No, they thought the other one was doing it. Mm-hmm. That's dumb.
Yeah. So to contrast that, my friend Matt has actually worked in several partnerships, and I think he has also come to the conclusion that he will never do a straight up partnership again. But he did one with this other guy who had a really smart idea. He said, all right, if we're going to do a partnership, we need to get up front a contract and sign it that states what each of us is going to put in terms of effort, and also what, you know, how we're going to divide the assets and the decision making power. So up front, they were like, I'm committing to doing this, and if I'm not doing it, and we're going to check every once in a while and do like reporting and auditing on it, then I'm like basically in breach of the agreement, and we will either terminate it or we can renegotiate it. But I kind of liked that because it's very easy to get excited and be like, you know CSS, I know HTML, oh my gosh, let's make some websites together, and like just say like, cool, 50-50, let's do it, everything's going to be great. And then, you know, 6 months down the line, it's not working.
Yeah.
And then of course, when you're friends, you've now created a situation where there's like money on the line and there's tensions, and that can seep into your friendship, which is difficult. So how have we made it work?
We haven't.
We're actually at each other. It's
we
like
hate each other now.
I feel like there's a movie where there's like two people they work together, and then the moment they get done, they hate each other.
I don't know that.
Oh.
One, but I don't watch a lot of movies.
It's Chicago.
Yep, don't know that. That's
Yeah.
a city, as far as I'm aware.
It is a city, turns out, in Illinois. But yeah, there's a duo in that movie who do not like each other in real life, but they're smiling and dancing on stage together because a 2-person act is more popular right now than a solo act. So I guess the way that we ended up working together is very different. And I think it sidestepped the potential for there to be like the headbutting, because it wasn't like, hey, I want to start something with you. It was more like, hey, I already have this thing. Do you want to help with it? So there was already like an implicit decision maker, because
you were my client essentially.
Yes.
Like, because I rebuilt the website way before I had ever been working with you full time. So it was also a much lower risk. It's like, if this sucks, we just won't do it again.
Yeah.
After this, it's a short-term project.
Yes. Okay. So that was another thing. I forgot about this. When we started, it was agreed that it was a 3-month project. And I guess there weren't really hard deliverables, because it was a weird situation where it was like, this is kind of my way of making it so you can just heal your arms and not have to drive to work every day.
College, but yeah, then we did the full-time.
You mean the website project. Yeah. So the website project.
We did 2 temporary trial sort of things.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. Boy,
that's a good point.
We did this for so long. Okay, so the website project, that was in college, and I basically just paid you what it took to quit your job for the rest of the semester.
Yeah, we just swapped out my job with building a website, which is what I wanted.
And that worked really well, because that was a pure freelancer-client relationship.
Yeah, and it was very clear, friendship or not, that even if I'm like, I don't really like it that way, if you want it that way, and I've already had said, hey, have you considered this? And you're like, I have considered it, or at least now I have. No, I still like it the other way. Well, then we know it's what you said.
Yeah.
It's very clear.
And I think something else that happened there, or I guess that helped with that situation, is I don't want to say that neither of us have a big ego, because like if I'm self-critical, I think that I do have a pretty big one. But, and I don't know if you would say the same thing about yourself, but I think that we both have the ability to let that go when we need to.
Yeah, I'm willing to just set something aside and say, this isn't my fight.
But you've also brought up things where I'm like, oh, I really want to do it this way. I think it's really elegant. And you'll be like, well, should you actually be focusing on that right now? Does that matter?
Well, that's an extra important piece, though.
You're right.
I try very hard. This applies the whole time, not to be a yes man, which is a damaging way that friends can work together, because then you'd never get any input to change your mind on something important.
So I think it is important for everyone to have a voice, and even if you're the person who is the de facto decision maker or the leader, you kind of have to not let that go to your head. And you have to realize that everyone else has valid points.
You've never straight up ignored what I had to say. You might tell me, actually, here's this. And I'll be like, oh, I didn't know that. I'm wrong.
Yeah.
That's fine. But we're both okay with being wrong.
So yeah, that worked well. And then the second time, it was a very different situation where I don't know if it was that like little car accident you got into, or just like the really bad desks at
I
your
think it was
workplace,
a combination of like too many things that all happened at the same time.
Yeah.
My posture was literally like, I looked like a hunchback at work for like 6 hours, didn't notice it.
Yeah, that's not good.
Had my elbows on the sharp corners of the desk sometimes because the height was off. Had a little bit of whiplash for a couple days that probably exacerbated it, and hadn't been sleeping nearly enough for about 6 months because Ashley worked nights and I stayed up because it was winter and I wanted to make sure she got back through the snow okay.
Yeah.
So I was sleeping like less than 5 hours for 6 months straight, having the worst posture ever, overworking myself to prove myself at the job, and then got hit by a car. And it was a very minor hit, but it's not a good mixture.
And that was a weird decision process, because it wasn't like, oh, I have a thing I need, so I'm going to hire you again. It was more like, I could put the extra money I'm making every month, which at the time wasn't a ton, but I could put that in my savings or my investment accounts. But if I take 3 months off of saving for investments, I'm not going to die.
It's not going to be super noticeable.
Yeah.
Well, and I didn't need much. I specifically was like, okay, I've got all these savings. I'll run those into the ground. How much do I need to survive?
I think it was
for 3 months.
$1,500 a month we did.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like, we're doing $1,500 a month for 3 months.
It's just, here's my bills.
And the deal was essentially, after 3 months, this will end unless for some reason we found that it works to work together.
Yeah, like Basically, my job was come up with ways to be useful.
Without damaging your arms.
Yeah, without leaning on my number one profitable skill, web development, at the time, which was very difficult, which is why now I wear like 6 different hats.
Yep.
Because I had to swap out my main skill for several others for a while.
Yeah, that's true. You started as web developer and now podcaster, researcher, and scriptwriter.
Yeah. I do a bunch of
pseudo manager,
server admins,
server
various
admin stuff.
administrative things.
Yeah. Because boy, I don't want to manage people.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I do now because I was just supposed to find ways to be useful, and that's still how I treat it. Like if I have spare time, I just be like, "What's useful? I could do that." And if I couldn't do that, I'm honest with myself about it, which is also important here. I'm not trying to sell you something that I can't actually deliver on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the reason this works, and at the time I was like, "This is a gamble." But it's a gamble that I think is going to be fine because I knew you well enough to know that you're not the kind of person who would ever take advantage of generosity. And you're the kind of person who really wants to prove yourself and make a contribution.
I'm very sometimes harsh against myself.
Yeah.
But I could never let this feel to me like it was nepotism, which is a problem that you would get if you were doing this in another office. You get a friend hired on and they suck at their job, or you hire a friend. I try to make sure that because you've put the trust in me to hire a friend, which is very dangerous, and especially after the previous time, I know you're protective of your business.
Yeah.
So I'm just always thinking, I need to make sure he never feels weird about that decision by never being like deceitful or disappointing in the sense that I'm just messing around. Like I'm supposed to do a job, so I treat it like a job.
Yeah, and that's definitely a challenge. Because, I mean, at this point, I would say that nearly everyone I work with is a friend.
Yeah.
Especially since all but one person on the team are now in Denver, and we all hang out, and it's like a big family almost.
Yeah.
You know, it brings up some tough, I guess potentially tough situations sometimes. Because, it's like, well, I like you as a person, so I don't want to have a tough conversation about performance or things like that.
Yeah, we all have to have a similar work ethic in order for it to work.
Yeah. Do you feel like I've been as communicative as I should be?
Sometimes I'm kind of floating around, but because my original idea was come up with stuff to be useful, I just fill it with other stuff. Because the thing is, I also don't want to be the kind of person, and this works for every job, that constantly goes to you to be like, what should I do next? What should I do next?
Oh, yeah.
Here's a thing I was doing. Do you like it? Do you like this? I made a tiny update. Do you like that? I changed the CSS value by 2 pixels. Is this approved? I can't publish it until... Like, there are some things I'll just do and leave you alone. You're busy. That's the point. My job is to make it so that you don't have to do more work. Otherwise, I should be paying you to do more work. It doesn't make any sense.
That was actually part of the reason why I got fired from a job in high school.
Yeah.
Because part of it is I would keep coming to the business owner asking for clarification or being like, I don't know how to do this. Or I was too afraid to try things on my own. Because I was like so afraid of screwing things up that I was just constantly going to her asking like, how do you do this again? You know, when I could have just sat there puzzling it out.
Yeah.
So.
I didn't get fired for that, but I did get reprimanded for it once. And it was, I was just looking for, am I doing this right? I need validation that I'm not ruining everything. Give me your validation. It's just like, I'm not paying you for me to validate you. Do the work now.
Yeah. This week's episode of our show is brought to you by our friends over at Audible, which is the best place on the internet to get your hands on audiobooks. And if you've listened to this show for any amount of time, you will know that I in particular am a big fan of audiobooks. I love going for long bike rides and listening to audiobooks. I love doing them or listening to them while I'm doing the dishes, doing like stuff around the house, cleaning up the house, which I actually have to do later today. I'm not looking forward to it, but I do have an audiobook I'm listening to. So
well, there you go.
It might be at least somewhat tolerable. But Audible is the best place on the internet to get audiobooks because they have the largest library that you are going to find. They have an absolutely unmatched selection with all the bestsellers, lots of really obscure stuff that you probably wouldn't expect to be on there, but they do have it, including like 17 different versions of Sherlock Holmes. I don't know if it's 17, but it's a lot of versions. Many a narrator has taken on Sherlock Holmes, and some of them are fantastic. They also have our recommendations for this week, and I want to let you go first with your recommendation.
All right,
mine's a weird one.
Oh, of course it's a weird one, Tom. My recommendation is a fiction book, and it is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. It is basically about a girl who solves a mystery sort of thing, while at the same time struggling and coping with the thought spirals that come with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Being a person who also struggles with OCD, this book was very powerful, and it allows things that are very hard to be worded about how OCD works and just sort of struggling with mental illness and things in general. And somehow John Green finds words that work. So I think it's a really good way to build either an understanding of yourself or understanding and empathy for other people. And it's just a good book all around.
I guess we both kind of picked titles that were a little life-changing then. So the one that I picked this week is Rationality from AI to Zombies by Eliezer Yudkowsky. And Eliezer Yudkowsky is the guy who wrote a fan fiction that I read earlier in life that kind of changed my outlook on how human decision-making works, how we should process emotions. It really shifted the way that I think, the way that I behave, and it made a very big change in my life from a philosophical point of view. It led me to exploring a lot of different topics that I hadn't explored before. It was a big deal. And for many, many years, he was also writing longer form, they're not fan fiction, there's articles about all these topics in human rationality. He talks about like heuristics, biases, logical fallacies. One of the articles that really stuck with me was the idea of like belief as a tire, like sticking with a belief just because you identify with the labels associated with that belief, and you're maybe in a social circle of people who all believe the same thing and you don't want to let that go. And, realizing that that's your justification for that belief, which doesn't actually hold water. So Rationality from AI to Zombies is a very long-awaited for compilation of many of these articles that he wrote over the years, and they are narrated. And I personally love the narrations because I don't always have time to sit down and puzzle through these long articles, but sometimes, again, I could go for a long bike ride and listen to them. And the best part is if you want to get a free audiobook download, either Rationality from AI to Zombies or Turtles All the Way Down, which is probably a shorter listen.
Probably, I imagine. I imagine so.
You can actually get a free audiobook download along with 2 free Audible originals that you cannot get anywhere else, and a 30-day free trial of Audible by going to audible.com/CIG or by texting CIG to 500 on your phone. That is audible.com/CIG. And then once you have gone through that trial and you become a member, every single month you're going to get 1 new credit, which is good for any audiobook title in their library, along with 2 new Audible originals every single month that, you can't get anywhere else, and access to tons of audio workout, fitness, and meditation programs. So once again, audible.com/CIG or text CIG to 500 on your phone to get that 30-day free trial, 2 free Audible originals, and a free audiobook download of your choosing. And big thanks to Audible for sponsoring this episode and being a supporter of our show. Second thanks goes out to our other sponsor this week, which is Skillshare. And as you probably know, if you've listened to this show at any length, Skillshare is an awesome online library full of tons of different classes, thousands of them, in fact, that can boost your skills in a myriad of different areas. They have graphic design courses, photography courses, video editing and animation courses. My friend Ali Abdal, and if you don't follow Ali Abdal, you probably should, because he has a lot of really great content on productivity. He has a brand new Final Cut Pro course over on Skillshare that is like 3.5 hours long. It's very, very in-depth. There's just tons of stuff you can use to boost your skill set on Skillshare, including the course that I want to recommend this week. Particularly, I want to recommend it to you, actually.
Yep.
So there's a course called Portrait Photography, Working with Natural Light by Benjamin Heath, who is a photographer that has, I think, like 700,000 followers on Instagram.
That's more than me.
And I checked out his work. It's actually excellent, and he really does know how to use natural light quite well. So if you're a person who's into photography, like kind of me, though I'm more of a videographer, but definitely you, because you like doing photography, and you want to learn how to take portraits, which can be one of the more profitable areas of photography if you want to make it into like a freelance business, then this course would be a great one to take. Additionally, when you get on Skillshare, you will also find a course from me called Productivity Masterclass, Building a Custom System That Works. And that class will teach you how to synergize, to use a business buzzword, your to-do list, your note-taking system, your calendar, and all the different pieces of your productivity system, and make sure they all kind of work in tandem and don't get too out of sync and too messy. So if you want to get a 2-month free trial of Skillshare with unlimited access to the entire platform, go over to Skillshare.com/geek and sign up. Once again, that is Skillshare.com/geek to get a 2-month free trial of unlimited learning. And after that, Skillshare is incredibly affordable, starting at just $10 a month. So it's definitely a good tool to have in your productivity tool belt. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this episode and supporting our show. And let's get back into it. So a few other things that I've had to make sure are set and aligned properly in my own head are, I guess, like thinking about how the value of the business that is generated is distributed, because in a purely capitalistic sense, and we're going to get into some philosophy here.
Tear down the system.
In a purely capitalistic sense, like the person whose name is on like the door, like the person who owns the asset gets to reap all the benefit from it.
Yeah.
But that just, I don't know exactly how to feel about that. Because like if we make an agreement, like, all right, I'm going to pay you X dollars per month to do X work. That's fair, right?
Yeah, if
and
both
like,
parties agree, it's perfectly reasonable.
Both parties agree in a business sense. But on the other hand, it's like, well, you've helped me build this machine, but because I own it, I get to reap the continuing benefits of it forever, as long as it's
like a
up.
solid investment, especially because your face is very important for YouTube. It's like you.
But even if I wasn't,
so like any underlying contributions to the business benefit your brand forever.
I mean, even if I wasn't, like, even if we were running an anonymous affiliate website, and like say I hired you to, make it faster or something.
That's true.
But if it's making, $10,000 a month off of affiliate links and it just keeps doing that, like it's, I get to just collect that. That's great.
All the future value isn't distributed equally. Yeah.
Now, I don't want to be unfair to the capitalistic mindset here, because in exchange for reaping the benefits of an ongoing machine, I also assume all the risks. Like I could pay you your fair rate and it could just not work because of some other factor beyond my control, or because I didn't do it correctly or didn't do it well enough for my part, and I could lose money. So, I do expose myself to the risk, but this is something that I've had to come to terms with, like working with friends or hiring people and becoming friends with them. It's like, is it right for me as the person who just has ownership, quote unquote, whatever that means, to be the sole benefactor of all this continuing value generation forever?
Yeah, I think you've done a very good job specifically of trying to make it so that everybody is fairly paid in a way that it feels like our time is valued similarly. It's kind of the same thing that I was doing with Ashley for rent splitting. We did the calculations. Looks like I make 65% of the household income. I don't know what the real numbers were, and you make this other number. So we'll split the rent by that number, because I think your hours working are the same value as my hours working. And just because I happen to make more because of capitalism and computers being valuable doesn't mean that I can just not value that you're out there working just as many hours.
Yeah. And I guess like this is a messy situation where like love or mutual admiration becomes a factor. Because you probably wouldn't do the same thing with a random roommate.
I probably wouldn't, unless we had specifically agreed to that, like they were going to try a new thing. I'm pretty understanding, but it would have to be very agreed to.
You'd have to be friends with them.
I'd have to be friends with them for a long time. I'd have to understand that. For a random roommate, if I don't even like trust you yet or know you, why should I make that sacrifice that is a very friendshipy sacrifice.
Yeah, and I guess that's like that's the kind of the crux of what I'm trying to get at right now is like when you work with friends, the same calculations you make as somebody who's just hiring professionals that you don't have anything more than a working relationship with, I think those change.
Yeah, well, you're invested in.
You
I
know?
mean, when you took on the gamble, when my arms weren't working and I couldn't program, you were specifically hiring me temporarily to see if something worked. That's a gamble that would be weird to make with somebody else.
Yeah.
Just, hey, could you pay me? I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll figure it out. But you had an extra personal investment in that if my arms are disabled for the rest of my life, well, I mean, you can't really hang out with me when I become destitute because my main job is computers and I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So it's no good.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't okay with that happening. And I think we had like tried to think of other solutions and we just couldn't because of student loans and all that kind of stuff.
It was so hard because, you know, the money that you make doing a thing that hurts you is needed to pay for the health care to help you from the hurt you're getting from the thing you're doing to make the money.
That too.
It's like an American healthcare trap.
Yeah, it very much is. So yeah, maybe that's what it is. Like to get further into the philosophy, like, you know, our government has not chosen to create a sufficient enough safety net. So sometimes, you know, you have to step up.
Yeah, and who are you
for
going to
the
give a
people in your
safety net
life.
to? You're probably the people you know first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not even like a selfish thing. I want to help my family with stuff, and I will probably help them always first before helping some random family in a similar situation. It's just like,
Yeah.
that's how communities work. It's how humans are.
Yeah. You have bonds.
And I want to help
certain people.
everybody, but like, I got to put my mom at the top of the list for a mansion.
Mm-hmm.
She's needed one for a while now.
Yeah, and I think everyone is that way. You know, even like the most diehard utilitarian.
Yeah, even if you're
person.
like you're yelling about it out loud, you're like, it's not fair, so I don't believe it. There's got to be some level of instinct that's still like, but the community around me is the one I can affect the greatest.
Yeah, and I knew that it was the case for me. Remember we had those arguments with our friend about what we'd do if we won the lottery?
Those are some good arguments that happened a lot.
My argument, he would always ask me, Tom, what would you do if you won the lottery? And for me, I'm like, well, number one, I really don't like the lottery because even though state lotteries often say they use the funds they get from people buying lottery tickets to fund a lot of programs, like, yeah, but it also contributes to addiction, and the advertising for lottery typically targets lower income people and breeds false hope. And there's all these issues that I really don't like. But the fundamental thing for me is if I were to win it, I would be given money that I did not earn. I did nothing to earn it.
So it like doesn't even really have any personal value.
Yes.
To you.
So what I would do if I was to win the lottery would be to spend some time finding a person who would be able to make the most calculated and I guess like best decision for a philanthropic purpose, and then I would let them give it all away.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe I would give it all to Team Trees now or something. I think trees are a good thing to
I
plant.
like trees.
Or, you know, if you look at the philanthropy, I forget the site. It's like, is it Charity Watch, I think? I think they put Against Malaria at the top as the most effective charity. But then again, there's also like the knock-on effects where if you say, all right, this is the number one ranked charity, and everyone's like, well, I want to give you the most effective one, then do other charities ever get a chance to improve?
Yeah, they
or
can't
get
be
off the
effective if
ground
they
or
can't
hire...
get past overhead costs.
Exactly, right? So I don't know. There's so many questions. I'm like Cheaty a little bit. You're more like Cheaty.
I
but...
feel too much like Cheaty. That show speaks to me, and in all the good and also all the bad parts. Just,
But anyway,
yeah.
So that was my position, and our friend hates my position on that. He's just like, you wouldn't use it for yourself at all. But when I ask myself, honestly, I'm like, okay, here's a scenario. My mom's in the hospital. There's no question. I would take some of that money for myself and pay for her hospital bills. Now, I wouldn't take a dime of that money to buy something fun for myself.
You wouldn't be like, I wish my TV was 2 inches wider.
Yep, wouldn't do that. I would go work for that money. But if somebody in my immediate family or a good friend of mine was in like medical trouble, then I would use lottery winnings to help them. And there's like, I've asked myself many questions along these lines. Like, would I use my lottery winnings to pay off my friend's student loans? I don't think so. even though I don't really like
That
the student
doesn't-
loan crisis and everything. It's like, again,
Yeah.
it's my core philosophy is I didn't earn that money. I should have never gotten it in the first place. So let's put it to the best use as possible. But there are certain things where my love for people in my life would override that main
Yeah.
philosophy.
Well, and student loans are different than like an illness or
Yeah.
something. You know, student loans, they're not necessarily fair, and I don't necessarily like how they have become, but you did sign up for them. Whereas a long-term illness is just random.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with anyone's choices. Well, maybe if you did eat nothing but Doritos and Mountain Dew, then it's probably your fault. But
That'll make you sign a contract. Like, all right, I'll pay for your
Yeah, you're gonna stop that, though.
bypass, but you're gonna eat
you're
some
done
broccoli.
with this. Yeah. I'm gonna teach you how to fry cauliflower so that it's delightful. Not necessarily fry it, but make it delightful.
You want to go to the vegan restaurant tonight?
I do because
Let's do it.
It's the best.
I think we actually should.
But yeah, we definitely got into arguments about those. I think I'd take a slice for a family safety net, and then I'd get rid of the rest. I don't need it. But
actually, that's
just
fair.
here's a slice.
fair.
It's not for me. It's for like if my family members get cancer or something. It's just I'm gonna hold it there, and one day
Like, put it into a
gonna
trust?
Somebody's gonna need it. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it's not just sitting in my bank account and a savings. Like, oh, look at that money.
And I guess if I think about
That's
it, like
interesting.
the best thing to do with that money would probably be to put it in a trust, and then to make calculated investments over time, or let the interest be what goes to philanthropic. Because I know if you like look into the economics of Norway, they're like super oil rich, but what they did with all the money from the oil is they put it into this gigantic trust, and over a very, very long period of time, they use the interest from investments in that trust to pay for social programs and things like that.
Yeah,
So maybe that's the
which
way
is
to do
pretty
it.
nice. Yeah, because then it just keeps happening.
But either way, it's like a philosophical divide. Either you use it for a purely utilitarian purpose to, help the human race in general, or you use it for your own emotional desires,
Yeah,
which
you get like a
include your
Scrooge
family.
money pit, and then you dive right in.
You're gonna get injured.
That's
that
why
way.
you need the money for the hospital bills afterward.
I broke my neck diving into my pit full of gold coins. Why did I do that? Well, luckily there's the gold coins to pay for it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But I think the entire point that I'm driving at is I feel like, when you're working with friends, these kind of philosophical decisions come into play.
Yeah.
Because it would be very easy for me as a business person to be like, I don't know if I can justify giving you a raise unless you work more for me or generate more value this month than you did last month. But from a, wanting everyone, like, I want the rising tide to raise all boats perspective, I'm like, well, this machine over here, this algorithm that none of us built, like, it's enriching me more. So shouldn't other people share in the spoils somewhat? And then where I don't know where to be is like, where do I be in the middle? Because I don't think it's necessarily fair to completely renounce the concept of ownership and be like, everyone, even if you don't have ownership in the company, has a straight up like, you get 30% of the profit. You get 30%. Is that fair? I don't know.
Well, I
Because
mean, what would that even do
technically
to
I
worker
did build it
motivation?
and I've put the most work into it.
I would say some people are more motivated when they have to work slightly harder for it.
True.
And then
Yeah.
if you give them what they need right up front, and you're like, oh, well, this was your long-term goal? Bam, that's your salary. Seems fair. What if then they're like, well, everything's okay now. I don't really need to.
That's true.
Then their
Yeah.
motivation slips. Now they're not doing as much work. Now you've got to have a pretty bad conversation because giving your friends a pay cut will feel
Yeah.
much worse than never having hired them in the first place or
Yeah.
having to fire them. That would
So, and this is the
be
situation
very
that,
risky.
This is a situation that we fortunately have not yet had to deal
Not
with,
yet.
but I know a lot of other businesses have, where it's like, I really like these people I'm working with, but the money is just not coming in anymore. What do you do then?
Yeah.
Like, then you have to have the tough conversation. So, and I think like we've had this conversation before. And I think like if you're going to work with friends, you need to have this conversation. Like, what happens if times get tough?
Yeah.
You need to be prepared for the fact that I may not be able to pay you anymore. And, I've tried to set things up in such a way where we would be able to weather that. Like, if the faucet got turned off today, I would be able to say, everyone on the team, I can pay you for another 2 months, at least.
Yeah, let's fix this real fast.
Yep. If we can't fix it by then we're going to have to go our separate ways. And, best of luck. I'll do everything I can to help you. But Like I will never, if I can help it, be like, sorry, there's no more money. We're done. You know?
Yeah, surprise.
Surprise. But hey, if like, I don't know, George Clooney and Brad Pitt and all the other Ocean's 11 guys like break into my bank account, steal all the money, then maybe
George
that
Clooney
happens.
wants your money.
They somehow also convince Congress to like defund the FDIC policy, so I don't get any kind of recompense for that. Somehow,
they've been very thorough.
They've been incredibly thorough to wipe me out.
Yeah.
I stupidly put all of the business money in Bitcoin or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and even if you didn't have to cut it off entirely, even if it wasn't that, and you're just like, we need pay cuts, but everybody's increased their life.
That's true.
So their
there could be
life
pay
costs,
cuts.
so now they're at the previous rate, but you're like, well, I can't now. Everybody needs to know pretty much ahead of time, before this decision ever happens, what are you more dedicated to?
Yeah.
This company or another job? Because if you got to take another job, sure, but you should know that entrepreneurship is difficult and that things happen sometimes.
And I guess the one philosophy I do have there is the whole leaders eat last thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I will be the first person to take the pay cut. It's not going to be like, yeah, I still want to, have all this money coming in every month, but I'm going to cut everyone else's pay. Like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
The leader should eat last. And I think that's a big part of either working with friends or becoming friends with people. Just because you're the boss man or the boss lady or whatever, a girl boss hashtag, doesn't mean that you can just be the king, right? I like the graphic. It's like the difference between a boss and a leader, or maybe it's like a king and a leader. It's like the king is like sitting on the throne that everyone else is pulling with a cart, and the leader is like out in front pulling the cart with everyone.
Yeah.
I think that's what you should strive to be if you are a leader. You should be working the hardest and not taking advantage of people.
Yeah, if you want to be a king, don't hire your friends. That's not going to work well for you.
That's true. Maybe don't be the king over your friends.
Besides, royalty in the past has always had some problems with people close to them, like
certainly
murdering them in
have.
their sleep, etc. And I don't want to set somebody up for that.
Yeah. Please don't murder me in my sleep. Just in case. Just in case you were thinking about that. Okay, so I want to talk about significant others, because both of us have also
we've also both
worked with our girlfriends.
Muddled those worlds up as well.
Mm-hmm. And do you still work with your girlfriend? Do you work with your girlfriend in any context that isn't just you both work with me?
So I've hired her for some things in the past. I haven't recently. We worked together on her business concept, her project, Made Adventurous, where she's making cool illustrations and prints and postcards and things. And I work with her to photograph a lot of it, to build websites and do stuff. So I'm still helping her directly with that.
Yeah.
And then but that's less tricky because it's more like I'm just giving my time to her. I don't really care about that. I'm just being supportive in that sense, and it's less stressful. But working with you, I'm actually in a position where I kind of have to be critical of her artwork.
Actually, yeah, you kind of manage
her work
for us.
Yeah, I art direct her podcast images
Yeah.
for the YouTube thumbnails and the share graphics. And I have to be able to say, I don't like how I don't think that makes like physics sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think the light wouldn't go there. And she's got to be able to either A, defend it and tell me, no, actually you're wrong and here's why, or B, do it and be willing to take critique of her art and then do it and not be like, Martin's being all bossy, I hate him. And she's done incredibly well with that. Like, I don't think I could offend her pretty much at any point giving her this kind of critique on the art. Maybe if I was just like, this is bad, you're bad, then maybe. But if I'm just saying...
that's a bad faith criticism.
Yeah, that's just me being bad at criticizing. Mm-hmm. If I just say, I think this image should... Actually, let's go with this idea instead. I could do an entire different idea. And she's just like, all right, let's work together and make that work.
Yeah.
So she has to be willing to take criticism from me without making it feel like I'm somehow above her in any relationship sense. Mm. And I have to be willing to not be a yes man to her when it could very well hurt me to say things that might hurt her.
Yeah.
It feels risky to be like, I don't like that. Don't hate me.
Has there ever been a time where you feel like it went too far in either direction?
I don't. Maybe in the beginning, if it was, but that's too far back. I don't even remember that happening. So I would assume maybe in the beginning it might have been a little weird.
Yeah.
But we've actually become pretty comfortable with it. It's
Okay.
very much when we're working on business stuff, it's business,
Yeah.
and that's it. But then a different danger is that we need to make sure we do enough stuff that's not businessy, so that we're not always working. Same with
True.
us.
And
If
you both
we-
work at home, so it's very easy to just always work.
We don't want to just be roommates with projects, and we don't want to just be coworkers.
Yeah.
So we still have to make an attempt to not turn every day into a business meeting, which is hard sometimes.
And our respective girlfriends love to be like, oh, hey, we're out at a restaurant. You guys are talking about work.
But I like the work. But
Yeah.
So that's difficult. But we got to make sure that we don't like let the friendship dissolve without us noticing because we're working, because that could very easily happen.
Yeah. I think this is the thing. Like, when you have a job over here and a personal life over here, there are real world things that are keeping those separate.
Yeah.
Your coworkers are not here when you're at home for you to talk shop, so you just don't, and you have a physical difference, like you're at work or you're at home. But when you work at home and you work with friends and you hang out with friends, you have to do the work to create that separation, and that's not easy.
Yeah, either one could take over. The friendship could take over and the business fails, or the business could take over and your friendship fails, and you're just like, oh, I guess we don't have any. Huh.
Yeah, I guess
it's been 10 years and we haven't really hung out, have we?
it really is walking
Well,
a
that's
tightrope.
weird.
Because if there was a situation where you're like, one of us gets, I don't know, let's say one of us gets really lazy, and I'm like, I want to play video games. Well, the friend in you might be like, all right, who am I to tell my friend that he can't do what he wants to do?
Yeah.
But then you could be on the other side where you get like too businessy, and you're like, no, you must produce
I'm throwing your
money
games in the trash.
for the engine of capitalism, and I don't care about your feelings. Like you have to figure out where the fine line you must walk is.
Yeah.
And it's even tougher in a relationship, I think. And I've been on both sides where it's like, oh, it's my relationship is so important that I won't say this. But on the other hand, sometimes, and I think I'm very susceptible to outside influences on this. So a lot of times when I've talked to particular acquaintances of mine who are very businesslike, I will get in this mode where I become very businesslike, and I can make some missteps. I remember at one point when Anna had started working for me, like I'm like, cool, I have to be, when I'm working, I have to be the manager. I have to be a little less concerned with emotions and more concerned with, making sure everything gets done. But I started to let that slip into personal things. So like, I think at one point, like we had like a shared task list. So I was like assigning Anna like regular work tasks, but I also like assigned something personal. And she's like, yeah, don't assign personal stuff like you're a boss. We need to have a conversation about that. I'm like, oh, you know what? You're right. I didn't think about that, So we've had to have conversations where it's like when we're talking about work stuff, sure, you're the boss. I'm working for you. But when we're not talking about work stuff, that does not exist. We're equals.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't bring the same feelings from either into the other. And that's just anything. You don't have to be a boss, employee, or client type thing relationship. If you get a friend hired at the office you work at, and they're really late on something, or they're part of your group and they're not doing their fair share, or they suck up to the boss, and you're like, oh, I hate you for this. You might bring that home, and that's so dangerous, because you could be very annoyed if they're screwing up your job by not doing their work, and you did all this work to get them hired. Why can't they just do this? Now your professional word means nothing. That's dangerous. I've recommended friends to jobs, but only when I was very specifically sure they would perform well at that job.
Yeah.
And I made it clear every time. And in fact, the last time I remember specifically doing that, I was like, hey, I noticed you're short. Actually, if you need the help, I'll come back and work for you again. But if me coming back would reduce room for my friend, who I think would be very good at this, I'll back out. I'm fine with it. I think they'd be more focused.
Yeah.
But I'll come back and like train them if you need that. Like I'm very willing to vouch for them only when I think it will work. You can't just I won't be taking phone calls that are like, oh, you're the reference for this friend, and then lie.
And actually, I didn't think about this, but the situation you just brought up is probably more common than anything we've talked about so far in this episode. I think a lot of people
giving recommendations.
A lot of people get asked like, "Hey, bro, can you put in a good word for me at your job? I want to get hired there." And sometimes you don't think that friend would actually be good at that job.
I'm not going to do it.
I have seen arguments and arguments online, and I've had friends who've been on the opposite side of this than me. I've had friends who are like, "It's your homie. You need to vouch for them because they would do the same for you. Doesn't matter if you think they were good.
If they would do the
put in
same
a good word for them
for me, then they should put that effort into being good at the job I'm recommending them for."
So this is something I will take a stand on. I will never put in a good word for somebody and lie about it.
Yeah.
Like,
they don't even have to have the skills first. It's just, do I trust that they will work hard to learn them?
Yep. Yeah. Ask yourself the question, 6 months from now, am I going to regret having put my word on the line recommending this person?
If I can't do that, I'll help you in literally any other way. Mm-hmm. I will help you prepare. I'll look at your resume. I'll do all this stuff. But I'm not going to lie, because if I tear down my professional word, I can't help any other friends who were more worthy of the jobs I'm recommending them for in the future. Because what if it's the same company and they're like, yeah, well, we didn't like the last person you sent.
Yep.
So how about you never call us again? Huh?
Yeah, you're damaging your own reputation, and you are enabling that person to continue living in a way that is not going to get them very far.
Yeah, that's also a different way of being harmful. Yeah.
It's like it's like a parent who doesn't allow their children to ever lose. It's like you have to let them experience hardship. If you don't, they're never going to learn how to experience it. And when you're not around to protect them from it, it's going to hurt that much worse.
Yeah.
And they're going to have no tools to cope with it. So let them experience the tiny little bit of hardship that is you saying, nope, I can't recommend you in good faith.
Yeah. Yeah, or even just be like, okay, here's the thing. I know about that job, which is why I have the connection and could give a recommendation. If you can do this little quick side project, it will take you like a day to do this. But if you can do this and show me that you liked it, that you did it successfully, and that you cared long enough to actually do the thing I just said would be good, it's going to make you look good to them. It's going to help in the interview. And I will then trust that you're willing to put in a little effort. Like, you don't even have to make it weird and personal. Just be like, you're going to look really good if you do this first, then I'll recommend you. And I can say that you did this and it's going to sound great, right?
Yeah.
So now I didn't even have to say, well, I don't trust you, so prove yourself. I just said, if you do this first, you're going to sound great when I recommend you.
Yeah.
And if they don't ever do it, well, then I'm waiting for you to do that. I want my recommendation to count.
Yep. Yeah, that's fair.
They're going to ask, why are you recommending them? Give me something to say. Do this real quick. Yeah, I want to make you sound good. You're my friend.
He's my friend.
Yeah, that's not good. Just he's my friend is a terrible... That's a terrible recommendation. Give me something good to say because I want you to look good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people have friends, and I don't know. A lot of
I
friendships.
Like that sentence by itself.
A lot of friendships are like the Shaun of the Dead friendship. It's like you can be friends with somebody even if they're not great at working, but
yeah,
that doesn't mean you need to put your professional reputation on the line to give them a leg up when they don't deserve it.
Yeah, I would.
You need to allow them to have to work and develop.
Yeah, I would literally teach my friends a new topic if they desperately, seriously wanted to learn it. Mm-hmm. But there's not going to be like free answers because then you'll just regret it later when you get fired and then I look bad and everybody's sad now.
Yeah.
I will teach my friends to fish.
Yes. Yeah. Teach your friends to fish. You don't just hand them a truckload of fish or a professional recommendation, which might be more valuable than a truckload of fish.
Yeah.
Maybe. Do you want a truckload of fish? I can't recommend you for this job.
Depends on the fish, though. If it's a high-end tuna, take the truckload of fish.
That's true. You could sell it for like $165,000.
Yeah, you're gonna be fine. You don't need a job
as long as you know how to sell it.
All
quickly.
You need is one truckload of fish. Here's the secret to wealth.
That's true. Yeah, that's like $1 million potentially. Yeah, depending on how big the truck is, depending on how high quality the fish is.
Yeah, sell it quick while it's fresh.
He's like, yellowfin right here, or I'll recommend you for the job. But the fish,
Yeah,
pretty good.
Clearly take the elephant in that situation. I guess.
Anyway, I feel like this is an episode where there are no hard answers. And there are going to be people out there who have gone into 50-50 partnerships and everything's been hunky-dory. But
Yeah.
I think it's a very risky thing to do.
Yeah, this is really just kind of... We've tried this in various scenarios. I mean, think about how long we spent talking exclusively about the pay situation. There are a lot of things that need to be thought through, and it's very risky. And this is just some of the deeper stuff. It could just be that you're really distractible when your friend's there. So you start throwing paper balls and airplanes at them, and they're just like, I'm trying to work. Or I can't work with Ashley usually, like even just in a coffee shop sense, because I want to leave locations after specific parts of work. Basically, like I'm walking across campus to a different class, and she will sit there for hours, and I'm just like, yeah, I'll come the first time, and then I'm gonna leave, work at home, and then pick you up later. You get to work there. You don't feel like you're rushed, and I don't ruin my focus. That's like simple stuff. There's just so much that can go wrong here.
Yeah.
But clearly, it can work out.
So I feel like the biggest thing is you need to have candid communication. You need to breach the hard topics before they really strain your relationship.
Yeah.
You should probably talk about things that may happen and consider what you're going to do before they happen. What happens if you run out of money? What happens if, there's all kinds of questions you could bring up. If you're starting a business together, what happens if we get an investor who wants to invest? If you're 50-50, that could be a friendship ender. Because one person could be like, that'll send us to the moon. That's the break we need. And the other person could be like, I'm philosophically against taking investment. I don't want to be beholden to somebody. I would rather bootstrap. That could be like, a huge butting heads thing. And each person could feel like the way you want to go about it is ruining my life. And you would never think about it until it happened. Unless
like your long-term business dreams. What do they entail?
There's all kinds of stuff like that. What happens if... we get into an incubator or an accelerator and they want us to move to San Francisco. It's like, do you want to leave home? What are your priorities?
Yeah, or am I taking the business we founded by myself and you're going to forever hate me for it because it was partially your idea and you're left out in the cold?
Yeah. I mean, at least the way that we work together, if I wanted to go all Silicon Valley bro and move to Silicon Valley and do something weird, like you could just be like, all right.
Yeah.
I'll just go do something else.
Yeah.
Or you could go with me, but it's not like, well, I'm 50% invested too, and I feel like I'm being dragged along now.
Yeah, because you might not say something about that for a while and let bitterness build up, and that's no good.
Or, the Social Network movie has a pretty good cautionary tale built into it about that. Because Mark and Eduardo were, I don't know if they were like actual 50-50 partners at first, but it certainly looks that way in the movie. And they don't end up friends. And the end of that,
the money got too big.
Yeah, and you could say in hindsight, well, like one of them had very obvious character traits that was going to lead to something like that happening. But when you don't have the value of hindsight, and when there are certain things absent from the situation that may change how somebody behaves, you may think it's all going to be fine, but you often don't know what's going to happen to a person when a lot of money comes into the situation or a lot of stress comes into the situation. So,
yeah,
I don't know. It could be volatile. Biggest thing is just communicate. Communicate. Try to keep empathy in mind, but also realize that if you're working together, you are working together.
Yeah,
and each person needs to respect that. Cool. So this is episode 281. Pretty philosophical episode, but if there are show notes, and I think there are show notes, there will at least be the link to Audible and Skillshare, where at least on Audible you can get our book recommendations, and on Skillshare you can get our course recommendations. But there's probably also some other kinds of links that we could put into the show notes. I don't know. We talked for a while. So cigpodcast.com/281 is where the show notes live, or you can go over to cigpodcast.com, no trailing slashes, no trailing numbers, to find out how to subscribe to this podcast. We are on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, all those good platforms. The ethereal cloud of space, reverberations of our voice are probably out there somewhere if you want to go chase them. You can probably fly it faster than the speed of sound, so you may be able to catch up to them. Then again, if this podcast is digitized and sent out as digital information, you're never going to catch it. So,
Oh no.
unless we create faster than light travel. So there's your incentive to invent faster than light travel, to go catch up with, our broadcasts or whatever. Anyway, if you want to support this show, there is a rating and review feature on Apple Podcasts where you can write a rating or give us a 5-star review if you think the show is worthy of that. And big thanks to you if you do. Beyond that, if you want to just share the show with a friend, maybe tell them what your favorite episode is, they might become a listener as well. And I think that is all we've got for you this week. So thanks for hanging out as always, and we will see you in the next episode. Thank you.